Christ is in our midst. Welcome to Spiritual Calisthenics. Today, on September 2nd, we commemorate St. Mamas the Martyr, as well as St. John the Abstainer, Patriarch of Constantinople, Paul, Patriarch of Constantinople, and Cosmas the Hermit. Regarding St. Mamas, the holy great martyr Mamas was born in Babylonia, Asia Minor, in the 3rd century, and pious and illustrious parents, the Christians Theodos and Rufina. The parents of this saint were arrested by the pagans for their open confession of their faith and locked up in prison in Caesarea in Cappadocia. Knowing his own bodily weakness, Theodos prayed that the Lord would take him before being subjected to tortures. The Lord heard his prayer, and he died in prison. Saint Rufina died also after him, after giving birth to a premature son. She entrusted him to God, beseeching him to be the protector and defender of the orphaned infant. God heard the dying prayer of Saint Rufina. A rich Christian widow named Amia reverently buried the bodies of the saints Theodos and Rufina, and she took the boy into her own home and raised him as her own son. St. Mamas grew up in the Christian faith. His foster mother concerned herself with the developing of his natural abilities, and early on she sent him off to study his grammar. The boy learned easily and willingly. He was not of an age of mature judgment, but distinguished himself by maturity of mind and of heart. By means of prudent conversation and personal example, young Mamas converted many of his own peers to Christianity. The governor, Dimitri, was informed of this, and the 15-year-old Mamas was arrested and brought to trial. In deference to his illustrious parentage, Dimitri decided not to subject him to torture, but instead sent him off to the Emperor Aurelian. The emperor tried at first kindly, but then with threats to turn St. Mamas back to the pagan faith, but all in vain. Saint bravely confessed himself a Christian and pointed out the madness of the pagans in their worship of lifeless idols. Infuriated, the emperor subjected the youth to cruel tortures. They tried to drown the saint, but an angel of the Lord saved St. Mamas and bade him to live on a high mountain in the wilderness, not far from Caesarea. Bowing to the will of God, the saint built a small church there and began to lead a life of strict temperance and exploits of fasting and prayer. Soon he received remarkable power over the forces of nature. Wild beasts inhabiting the surrounding wilderness gathered at his abode and listened to the readings of the Holy Gospel. St. Mamas nourished himself on the milk of wild goats and deer. The saint did not ignore the needs of his neighbors. Preparing cheese from this milk, he gave it away freely to the poor. Soon the fame of St. Mamas' life spread throughout all of Caesarea. The governor sent a detachment of soldiers to arrest him. When they encountered St. Mamas on the mountain, the soldiers did not recognize him and mistook him for a simple shepherd. The saint then invited them to his dwelling, gave them a drink of milk, and then told them his name, knowing that death for Christ awaited him. The servant of God told the servants of the emperor to go on ahead of him to Caesarea, promising that he would soon follow. The soldiers waited for him at the gates of the city, and St. Mamas, accompanied by a lion, met them there. Surrendering himself into the hands of the torture, St. Mamas was brought to trial under a deputy governor named Alexander, who subjected him to intense and prolonged tortures. They did not break the saint's will, however. He was strengthened by the words addressed him from above, "Be strong and take courage, Mamas." When they threw St. Mamas to the wild beasts, these creatures would not touch him. Finally, one of the pagan priests struck him with a trident. Mortally wounded, St. Mamas went out beyond the city limits. There, in a small stone cave, he gave up his spirit to God, who, in the hearing of all, summoned the holy martyr Mamas into his heavenly habitation. He was buried by believers at the place of his death. Christians soon began to receive help from him in their affliction of sorrows. St. Basil the Great speaks thus about the holy martyr Mamas in a sermon to the people: "Remember the holy martyr, you who live here and have him as a helper. You who call on his name have been helped by him. Those in error he has guided into life. Those whom he has healed of infirmity, those whose dead children he has restored to life, those whose life he has prolonged. Let us all come together as one and praise the holy martyr." Your martyr, O Lord, in his courageous contest for you, received as a prize of incorruption and life from you, our immortal God. For since he possessed your strength, he cast down the tyrants and wholly destroyed the demon's strengthless presumption. O Christ God, by his prayer, save our souls, since you are merciful. With the staff bestowed on thee by God, O great holy martyr, shepherd us, your holy people, now in green and life-giving pastures, swiftly crushed with godly power unseen in wild beasts, underneath the feet of them that praise thee with longing. For in dangers we all have thee, O Mamas, as our fervent protector and help. As a short aside, because this is going to be a little special spiritual calisthenics for me, when I was a lay assistant at a parish, St. Nectarios in Palatine, I had a young Goyan named Michael. And every year on November 8th, I would wish him a happy name day. He would correct me every single year and say, "Don't celebrate on November 8th. I celebrate on September 2nd. I celebrate St. Mamas. I am Michael in English, but I am Mamas in Greek." Well, one day in December, he was playing a game and received a grievous injury, and everyone thought that this poor boy was going to die. And so he and all of his friends prayed together. Now, when I say he, I mean in spirit because he was unfortunately in a coma. And all of his friends gathered at the church almost every night to pray the Paraklesu service to the Mother of God for his deliverance. And then one night, at one of these services, Father George Lamberis, who was at the time was not ordained, but he was a lay assistant, similar to me at another parish, and he had been a counselor at Ionian Village, where they go to a church that is dedicated to Saint Mamas. His skull actually is housed. And so he had purchased an icon from that monastery that had been blessed on the skull of Saint Mamas. And so he brought that icon with me, and we visited Mamas in the hospital, prayed over him. A few days later, Mother had fallen asleep praying over him, and she woke up to hear him say, "Hi, Mom." Now, of course, this is a miracle in and of itself. And that following spring, that we had a church talent show. Every year, the kids would gather together to showcase their talents. And one of Mamas's talents was that he is a savant when it comes to music. He just hears it and he can play it in the piano. And he played the most beautiful, beautiful renditions of music for us that night, and everyone was sobbing church hall first of all to have our Michael, our Mamas back, to also hear this beautiful music from him. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and I receive a call from the metropolis that my date had been decided for the ordination to the priesthood, and that it was going to be Sunday, September 2nd, September 12th. So I rejoice because I fully believe that this young man, whose patron is Saint Mamas, was healed through the intercessions of Saint Mamas, through the prayers of another great, was not at the time a priest, but he, of course, is a priest now, Father George Lamberis, as well as all of the prayers of his peers and his friends and his loved ones. And so to be able to be ordained to the priesthood on the feast of this great saint brought me humble joy, to say the very least. So I consider Saint Mamas a extreme protector of my priesthood, and I venerate his holy example and pray to follow after his humility and his courage. May Saint Mamas always intercede for us. We also celebrate today Saint John the Abstainer, Patriarch of Constantinople. And St. John became patriarch during the reign of Tiberius in the year 582, governing the church for 13 years and 5 months, and reposed in peace in 595. It was during this patriarch's reign in the year 586 that the title ecumenical patriarch was not used before this, and it came to be instituted. A model of faith in the image of gentleness, an example of your life has shown to you forth your sheepfold to be a master of temperance. You obtained through being lowly gifts from on high, and riches through poverty. John, our Father and priest of priests, intercede with Christ our God, that he may save our souls. The epistle for St. Mamas is from St. Paul's letter to the Romans. Brethren, we know that everything works for good with those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. What shall we say? If God is with us, who is against us? He who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all, will he not also give us all things with him? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? It is Jesus Christ who died, yes, who was raised from the dead, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed interceded for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. Now we get to one of the most powerful lines in Romans, which is so appropriate for St. Mamas. and is a verse that I always encourage people to read whenever they are afraid, whenever they are scared, whenever they are lonely. No. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor heights, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Nothing, not death, nothing in this life can separate us from his love, and that empowers us. In the Gospel according to St. Mark, at that time John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came to him and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, new from the old, and a worse tear is made. No one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is lost. So are the skins, but new wine is for fresh skins." In other words, this is the newness of creation, the new church, the new way. Christ is our bridegroom and our shepherd. I pray that you have a wonderful day. Intercessions of St. John the Abstainer, Patriarch of Constantinople, St. Mamas the Martyr. Blessed and wonderful day. I hope you've enjoyed today's spiritual calisthenics.